Viewer discretion is advised. I mean it, this stuff gets really bad. Well, you asked for it.
Embarrassing!
As a kid in Toronto, Canada, Aubrey Drake Graham aspired to be a hockey player, but after suffering an injury, his mom demanded that he quit. During his time, he appeared in a skit at the 1997 NHL Awards, which made him want to start acting. Luckily, his friend's father was a talent agent, so he was easily able to land a role in the high school drama show Degrassi. His actual high school life was hell, getting constantly bullied for his racial and religious background. That, and his difficulty balancing school and acting, made him decide to drop out. Unfortunately, Degrassi did not pay very well, all while his single mother was already struggling financially. So in his spare time, he turned to music, and in 2006, released his first ever song, Do What You Do. It appeared on the soundtrack for The N, who knows what that stands for, the network where Degrassi aired in the US. That same year, under an unofficial label of his, he released his first mixtape, Room for Improvement. It was not a commercial success. It sold only 6,000 copies and generated $304 in royalties. Undeterred, Drake got to work on his second mixtape, Comeback Season, which would release the following year. This project caught the attention of Lil Wayne, who invited him to join his The Carter 3 tour. From then on, Drake's career took off, and he would spark one of the biggest bidding wars in all of music. Ultimately, he landed on Lil Wayne's Young Money Entertainment, where he'd release his first 2 albums. But he didn't need them for long, as the records were so successful that he ended up creating his own label, OVO Sound. Drake would soon take over the world. His music consistently topped charts, shattered streaming records, and sold millions of units. Currently, he stands as the highest-selling digital artist of all time. However, his immense fame also brought his flaws into the spotlight. In 2017, he befriended Stranger Things actress Millie Bobby Brown when she was 14 and he was 31. The pair went to dinner together for 2 nights, hung out in Australia, and went to a Golden Globes after party. During an interview, Brown would mention that he'd text her advice regarding boys, and when asked to elaborate, she said,
"You know, that stays in the text messages."
Millie would make a statement defending Drake, but she hasn't spoken about it since. In 2016, a 16-year-old Bella Harris posted a selfie with him, where he got eerily close to her, all while Drake wouldn't publicly acknowledge their friendship until she turned 18. There's also this photo of him kissing Kylie Jenner at her Sweet 16 party, and Hailey Bieber reportedly befriended him when she was 14. He even got a matching necklace with her. Most damning of all is this 2010 video, where a fan walks up on stage and Drake, age 23, kisses and dances with her. Only afterwards, he asks her age. Then he says,
"I can't go to jail yet, man. 17? Why do you look like that? You dick. Look at all this."
As gross as these incidents were, they largely flew under the radar until he poked the hornet's nest. We've got a busy schedule, so I won't cover the entire Kendrick versus Drake beef, but the key takeaway from it was Not Like Us, Kendrick's 5th diss track that called out Drake's questionable behavior towards minors. This song was expertly designed to be a mainstream pop hit, all to raise as much awareness as possible. It was even made copyright free. It's no coincidence that since this song came out, several public figures have been outed for being PDF files. If you go into their comment sections, I guarantee you'll find many references to it. Drake was cooked. As one final Hail Mary, he made The Heart Part 6, which amounted to him going, "Nuh-uh." It wasn't received well. The winner was clear. Since writing this, he's tried to sue UMG for allowing the track to be released, which only made it spike in popularity again. He's still got a career and remains at the top of Spotify, but his credibility certainly has taken a hit. So that's Drake. Overall, very sus. With that said, he is by far the tamest person we're covering today. Strap yourselves in.
Looky here, look what I got. Don't think I won't let little Diddy drop.
Sean John Combs grew up poor with his sister and mother. When he was only 2, his father was killed in a shooting. Sean had a very short temper, which granted him the nickname Puff because of how he'd huff and puff. When he began attending Howard University, he became infamous for hosting massive parties that drew up to 1,000 attendees. It's here that some of the earliest accounts of his problematic behavior emerged. Peers recall that he'd non-consensually touch women, break into fits of rage, and beat his then-girlfriend with a bell. Combs dropped out his second year to become an intern at Uptown Records, networking with many notable figures in the music industry. Eventually, he'd become vice president of the company. With his newfound power, Sean gave back to the community and hosted a basketball game for charity. But due to poor planning, tragedy struck. The venue chosen could only hold half of the 5,000 attendees, which resulted in a crowd crush that killed 9 people and injured 29 more. This, along with some internal conflicts, led to Combs being fired from Uptown. By this point, though, he had more than enough money and connections to start his own label, Bad Boy Records. Right out of the gate, the company hit the jackpot by signing Biggie Smalls, who would release his multi-platinum debut album, Ready to Die. In just 4 years, Bad Boy Records was generating tens of millions from a whole slew of artists, one of them being a 15-year-old Usher Raymond IV. Usher was sent to live with Sean by his previous producer, L.A. Reid, who found it difficult to record with him while puberty was changing his voice. Combs, now having full legal custody, introduced Usher to a wildly inappropriate lifestyle for his age, which was dubbed a puffy flavor camp. Under the name Puff Daddy, Sean began creating music of his own, and would debut with the album No Way Out, which sold over 500,000 copies in its first week. Puff had become a titan, and from then on, he would abuse his power like crazy. Nas portrayed him being crucified in the music video for Hate Me Now, a collab between the two. At first, Puff was okay with it, but at the very last second, he changed his mind and demanded it be removed. But it was too late. The video already aired on MTV. So in a fit of rage, he stormed into the office of Nas's manager and attacked him with a champagne bottle. That same year, he, Jennifer Lopez, and Shine were involved in a nightclub shooting. Puff and J-Lo fled the scene and abandoned Shine, who witnesses were then bribed into saying was responsible. There's even evidence that strongly suggests he was behind the killing of Tupac and Biggie. For all of these events, the courts barely gave him a slap on the wrist. Puff Daddy's career was not in danger. In fact, he'd reach billionaire status. From then on, he would be known as P. Diddy and continued to thrive. Starting in 1998, Diddy started throwing parties like he did back in college, now on an even grander scale. Now big-name celebrities were visiting, and he even got massive brands to sponsor these events. In 2009, he would gain custody of a 15-year-old Justin Bieber, as shown in a now infamous video. In it, Diddy promises Justin a Lamborghini and mansion when he's old enough, which on the surface seems like a dream come true, but Bieber is noticeably uncomfortable throughout it, and at one point Diddy says,
"Where we hanging out and what we doing, we can't really disclose."
Yeah, I think it's safe to say it's been disclosed, and it's not pretty. In November 2023, Diddy's ex-girlfriend, Cassie Ventura, sued him for physical and sexual abuse during their 11-year relationship. She also claimed that he blew up Kid Cudi's car after he showed interest in her. The case was settled out of court, but then more lawsuits followed. 2 women would claim that Diddy drugged and essayed them. One of them, who was only 16 at the time, recalled that he choked her unconscious to get her not to talk about it. A 4th stated she was raped by him at 17. Then, Lil Rod, a producer of his, would claim he was raped by Diddy and his son, Justin Combs. This was a family business. The orgies, dubbed freak-offs, were Diddy's punishments towards people who wronged him. On some occasions, he would film his victims and threaten to leak the videos if they spoke up. Diddy's empire was crumbling fast. After he vigorously denied everything on social media, then came out with a YouTuber apology, his house was raided by the FBI. In their search, they discovered hard drugs, illegally modified guns, and most infamous of all, over 1,000 bottles of baby oil to be used as lubricant. Brands that were working with him cut ties. Radio stations stopped playing his music. His streaming numbers plummeted, and songs that referenced him had their lyrics changed. Man, Kesha's TikTok has to be the most cursed song in history. Not only does it have an app that's destroying society named after it, but its opening line aged horrendously. Diddy would be arrested in September 2024, but things have only just begun. He has 120 more upcoming lawsuits covering decades of assault. 25 of these victims were underage. I'm telling you, the YouTubers have nothing on the people in this video.
You're gonna cruise the island, that's something you should know. There ain't no island.
YouTube doesn't like it when you say this guy's name, so I'll call him Nissan Leaf. Nissan Leaf was an academically gifted kid, so much so he graduated high school when he was only 16. He then studied advanced mathematics at Cooper Union, before switching to New York University, then dropping out entirely. But despite obtaining no degree of any kind, he became a teacher for a very prestigious college prep school. Leaf showed very suspicious behavior towards his underage students. He would constantly stare at them, flirt with them, and on one occasion he even attended a party where the students were drinking. While at a parent-teacher conference, he'd meet Alan Greenberg, the CEO of the Bear Stearns Investment Bank. They quickly became close friends, and later on, Nissan Leaf quit teaching to work at the bank. At the time, he didn't even know the difference between a stock and a bond, yet somehow, he got hired, and was crowned Bachelor of the Month by Cosmopolitan, where he'd accept the honor by asking cute Texas girls to write him letters. Somebody went to the Chris Chan School of Riz. 4 years in, though, he'd be asked to leave due to a Regulation D violation, which, in simple terms, meant he failed to verify that he's a qualified investor. But he had made enough to start several finance companies of his own, many of which were solely designated for the ultra-rich. It's through them that he developed connections with some of the most powerful people in the world. CEOs, celebrities, scientists, politicians, you name it. He also met a British socialite named Ghislaine Maxwell, whom he started dating. Nissan Leaf enjoyed a life of luxury, purchasing a mansion, a ranch, 7 apartment units, a private jet, and the little St. James Island, where he began a horrifying pursuit. Starting in 1999, Ghislaine would recruit underage girls for Nissan Leaf to abuse. He would bribe them to give them massages, undress, and then perform acts on them. If they resisted, Leaf would compromise by getting them to bring more victims. And just like Diddy, he'd record these disgusting acts to be used as blackmail. His private jet earned the nickname Lolita Express for how it would fly victims to his island. This operation went on for years, until the stepmother of a 14-year-old victim caught wind and reported him to the police. An FBI investigation began, but conveniently, a lot of the evidence just magically disappeared. And after Leaf entered a baffling court agreement that said he could only be charged at state level, the search came to an end. During his trial, Nissan Leaf hired an incredibly skilled team of lawyers to defend him, all while the grand jury was only given bits and pieces of the story. What followed was one measly count of solicitation and a very lenient prison sentence of 13 months. And I use the term prison very loosely, because he was given quite a bit of freedom, and apparently his behavior was good enough to be let out early. Then he continued doing the same thing, all while high-profile figures remained on good terms with him. Then, after almost a decade, a New York Times article about it was published, which prompted the case to be reopened. This time, they were not gonna fuck around. Nissan Leaf was finally about to be given proper punishment. Then an issue arose. Nissan Leaf was trying to end his own life while in jail, but was caught before he could do it. He'd be put on suicide watch for 6 days before returning to his unit, now with a cellmate and a guard checking him every half hour. But that was not enough, because on August 10th, 2019, he was found dead. The autopsy ruled that he hung himself while no nobody was watching, which would have been next to impossible given the amount of security. Not a single person believed it. Someone had to have murdered him so he couldn't incriminate the elite. Conspiracies ran wild. The phrase, Leaf didn't kill himself, became a viral meme. If there's any contender for most talked about criminal case of the 21st century, if not ever, it's this one. Yet there's basically no straightforward answers about his life, so writing this segment was a nightmare. Hopefully I was able to give an adequate summary, and hopefully I didn't give too much info so I don't get assassinated. From one Stein to another. Harvey Weinstein was born to a rich family in New York City. He ran a business promoting local rock concerts alongside his brother, Bob Weinstein, and Corky Burger. Yes, there is a person named Corky Burger. Under their Harvey and Corky Productions company, they'd bring major acts like Frank Sinatra, the Rolling Stones, and The Who to audiences in their city. Their business was booming, and in 1979, the Weinstein brothers used their profits to create Miramax films, marking their foray into cinema. Initially, it focused on concert films, but it then started shifting to independent art house movies that major studios rejected. As Miramax's catalog continued to grow, it caught the attention of Disney, who would purchase the company for $80 million. Harvey and Bob still remained in charge though. This is when some of Miramax's most iconic films were released. Pulp Fiction, Good Will Hunting, Scream, Kill Bill, Scary Movie, the list goes on. The Weinstein brothers became a Hollywood powerhouse, earning countless accolades. In fact, at the Oscars, Harvey Weinstein was thanked in 34 acceptance speeches, which is the second most out of anybody, only being surpassed by Steven Spielberg. However, with filmmakers, his reputation was far from glowing. Harvey became notorious for his controlling nature, often editing foreign films to be more marketable in the States. When anyone opposed his decisions, he'd shout and argue with them non-stop. Working with him was a nightmare, but that didn't stop his reign. In 2005, the brothers would leave Miramax and start the Weinstein Company, continuing to dominate the independent film industry. Rumors had begun circulating about Harvey using casting couch practices, but they weren't concrete. Anytime journalists tried to investigate, the victims were hesitant to talk about it. In 2015, model Ambra Gutierrez told police that Harvey had touched her non-consensually, with audio evidence to prove it. Apparently, that wasn't good enough proof, so no charges were filed, and the media labeled Ambra as a clout chaser. Luckily though, everything would unravel just 2 years later, when the New York Times sifted through decades of records at Harvey's companies and found 8 settlements of him sexually harassing female employees. Just a couple days later, another report showed 13 more claims, with 3 of them involving SA. There were also reports that actresses who didn't comply with Harvey's advances were kicked out of projects. In total, there were 16 executives at his companies who witnessed this behavior. Not a single one of them raised an eyebrow. He's estimated to have assaulted 18 women and harassed over 100. This sparked a massive chain reaction. In the weeks following, the Me Too movement was created for survivors of misconduct, which led to many public figures being accused. Since then, pretty much any allegation can be traced back to this movement. The Weinstein Company proceeded to fire him, but the already struggling studio had no hope of recovering from a scandal this big. Shortly thereafter, it would file for bankruptcy. Bob Weinstein expressed disgust towards his brother's actions and denied ever knowing about it. In fact, the two had not seen each other in years due to Harvey's callous attitude. After a long and arduous trial took place covering 30 years of crimes, Harvey Weinstein was sentenced to 36 years in prison. Dan the man with the plan to get in the van and do what he can while avoiding the ban, Schneider, aka Daniel James Schneider, was a below-average student academically, but when it came to theater, he excelled. His high school knew him as a class clown, and would elect him senior class president after giving a humorous speech. While attending the University of Memphis, his acting professor told him a movie was being filmed nearby, the 1984 teen comedy Making the Grade. Dan seized the opportunity opportunity and auditioned, giving a performance so impressive that not only did he land the role, but he also got a part in another film, Hot Resort. Schneider officially had his foot in the door. In 1986, he made his television debut by starring in Head of the Class, a high school sitcom that ran for 5 seasons. Through this show, he befriended co-star Brian Robbins, since they both shared an interest in creative writing. The two would write several scripts together, one of which actually became an episode of the show. They were multi-talented, which led to them being chosen to host the 1988 Kids' Choice Awards. This was Dan's official introduction to Nickelodeon. An executive at the network, Albie Hecht, loved their work and wanted a TV show from the two, so Brian pitched the idea of a kid-friendly Saturday Night Live, which would eventually become All That. It was a smash hit, running for 10 seasons, getting 3 spin-off shows, and a theatrical film. Oh, hello, yeah! All thanks to Dan Schneider's comedic writing. He was essential to all that success, as evidenced by a drop in ratings after he left. While away from Nickelodeon, he created the show Guys Like Us for the United Paramount Network, which bombed hard and was canceled before its first season even ended. He then went to Warner Brothers to create What I Like About You, a far more successful show, but Nickelodeon wanted him back, so Schneider agreed to return for All That's rebrand in 2002. But he also had bigger plans in mind. He had an idea brewing for a new sitcom, a show about 2 stepbrothers with opposing personalities living together. The starring roles were given to budding actors Drake Bell and Josh Peck, and thus Drake and Josh was born. And it broke records for the network. It consistently ranked among the top 10 most watched programs. Millions of kids were tuning in to see their goofy misadventures. Soon, Nickelodeon realized that Dan was the man, so more shows by him were greenlit. Zoe 101, iCarly, Victorious, Sam and Cat, Henry Danger, Game Shakers. He was unstoppable. Dan Schneider was dubbed the Willy Wonka of television for his ability to captivate children worldwide. Deja vu. But as the kids who watched his shows got older, they started to notice things upon rewatching them. These teenage stars were put in very suggestive positions. On top of that, there was a disturbing amount of jokes involving feet. Behind the scenes, Dan showed very questionable behavior around young cast members. People were concerned. Then former child stars came out with stories about how he'd pay them to tickle their feet, as well as invite them to his house for pool parties. Writers of his recounted instances of verbal abuse and said that he'd frequently cross boundaries with female employees. In 2018, Nick decided to end Dan's contract for reasons they wouldn't disclose. Whether or not it was because of the allegations is anyone's guess. But somehow he wasn't blacklisted entirely, because in 2021, he announced he was making a brand new TV show on a different network aimed at adults. Luckily though, this enthusiasm did not last long. Just a year later, iCarly actress Jeanette McCurdy would release I'm Glad My Mom Died, a memoir that described the abuse she suffered throughout her career. In the book, she refers to a mysterious figure named the Creator, who would put her in uncomfortable situations and yell at her when she expressed concern. This helped push the Dan Schneider allegations further into the mainstream, and it would only grow bigger in 2024 when the documentary Quiet on Set premiered. This series focused on the horrific work environment at Nickelodeon and included pretty much everything involving Dan Schneider. Now, more than ever, people knew about Dirty Dan. He had to address it, so iCarly actor Boogie brought him over for an interview, where this homeless-looking man apologizes for the innuendos, but denies everything else and plays the victim. This did not shift public opinion at all, so Dan's next plan was to sue the creators of the documentary. We can only hope that the lawsuit goes nowhere and this upcoming show never sees the light of day. I'll just throw this out there, a friend of mine in school claimed he was an extra on Sam and Cat. I wonder how he's doing.
The one, the only, Jared Fogle!
Jared Scott Fogle was a hardcore binge eater for the first 20 years of his life. On some days, he would eat upwards of 10,000 calories. When he enrolled at Indiana University, he weighed 425 pounds and often struggled to walk or stay awake. Then one day he fell asleep while driving to school and got into a car crash that almost killed him.
Oh, we were right there, man!
This was a wake-up call. Jared had to change. So for a New Year's resolution, he started a diet consisting of 2 Subway sandwiches a day, since he lived just a few steps away from one on campus. Health professionals would never recommend this, but it somehow worked, and Jared dropped nearly 250 pounds. This impressive feat spread all across campus, and soon it would be shown in a men's health magazine. Then Subway executives read up on it and saw massive marketing potential. So in 2000, he would appear in a local commercial for the restaurant chain, which featured a disclaimer that the diet wasn't guaranteed to work. Regardless, the ad was a massive hit. People flocked to Subway, believing it to be a healthy alternative to fast food joints. Because Jared was a regular guy and not a rich celebrity, consumers related to him far more. Subway had found its golden boy and would go on to feature him in over 300 commercials, tripling the company's revenue. How do you get that many ads out of this one story? I don't know. Jared Fogle became a national sensation, which you'd think would affect his everyman persona, but no. In 2004, he established the Jared Foundation, a charity organization aimed at fighting childhood obesity. He then began touring elementary schools nationwide, giving presentations about healthy eating and getting paid tens of thousands to show up. Jared was living the dream, but eventually, Subway would start to phase him out of commercials and experiment with different campaigns. While Jared still remained involved with the brand, he was no longer the focus of their marketing. Still though, he had accumulated millions by this point, which he earned from telling the exact same story over and over again. You and I would kill for a life that easy. But Jared thought different, and he chose to utterly sabotage it. So with less commercials to film, Jared now had more time to focus on his foundation. He would appoint a man named Russell Taylor as director, forming a very close bond with him. In their spare time, the two would hit up strip clubs and bring home exotic dancers to have sex with, all while Jared was married, mind you. The ages of the strippers didn't matter. In fact, they preferred juvenile escorts. Taylor and Jared were traveling constantly, which made them worried that someone would break into the foundation's office. So they installed hidden cameras and by complete accident captured a teenage intern having sex with her boyfriend. This piqued Jared's interest, so he asked for more cameras to be placed in the hopes of capturing similar encounters. Then he instructed Russell to place cameras in children's bathrooms to capture them changing or bathing. In return, Jared brought him all kinds of luxuries and paid off all his debts. Before he knew it, Russell Taylor's entire life was controlled by Jared, who called himself his daddy. As the collection of cheese pizza grew, Jared began dating a radio host named Rochelle Herman, and did not even try to hide anything. He would constantly make remarks about how he found middle school girls attractive, which horrified her. In the hopes of getting him arrested, she secretly recorded these conversations and sent them to authorities. But audio evidence isn't enough. Even though he literally admits to having slept with a minor in one clip. An investigation could only go through if he had distributed illegal material. Cindy Mills, a Subway franchisee who witnessed that same behavior, told higher-ups about it. However, the company dismissed it, arguing that because Jared wasn't an employee, their policies weren't violated. But eventually, Jared and Taylor's operation would come to an end. So, Russell Taylor was in an open relationship. He would regularly hook up with ladies, whilst already having a wife who also possessed CP. How do they get other people on board to commit horrible crimes? I can't even get people to play Jackbox with me. So he meets this one anonymous woman who owns several horses. Russell asks her if he could come over to... I forgot to mention Russell Taylor was also into animals, and proceeded to send her videos and images of God damn it, what's the code word for animal love? At long last, there was a probable cause for an investigation, and thus Taylor was arrested. While being interrogated, Russell Taylor spilled the beans and told them Jared Fogle was the mastermind behind it all. Publicly, Jared pretended to be shocked by Russell's actions, removing him from the foundation. But the facade was quickly blown when the FBI raided his house and found illegal videos in the terabytes. He was then sentenced to a very light 15 years and 8 months in prison. Oh god, he gets out in 5 years. Subway announced it severed all ties, closed the restaurant that Jared went to, and to add insult to injury, it was discovered that his foundation was a scam. He wasn't fighting childhood obesity because he was busy fighting childhood virginity. I'm gay. Kevin Spacey Fowler had a traumatic upbringing, dealing with physical, verbal, and sexual abuse by his neo-Nazi father. In fact, the reason he abbreviated his name to just Kevin Spacey was to distance himself. In 10th grade, he was sent to a military school after attempting to burn down his sister's treehouse. People actually had treehouses back then? God, I thought they looked so cool as a kid, but nobody had one. Anyway, despite these early struggles, Kevin got the help he needed and graduated co-valedictorian in high school. He would then get accepted into New York's prestigious Juilliard School, graduating in 1981 with a degree in drama. Afterwards, he began appearing on Broadway, though mainly in smaller roles. Over the next 5 years, he'd climb the ranks in theater and land bigger and bigger parts, before making his film debut in Heartburn. It was here that Kevin decided to switch over to movies and TV, though he kept his involvement in the theater industry. Hollywood quickly saw that he was very skilled at character acting, and in 1995, he'd skyrocket to new heights by starring in 2 highly acclaimed movies. Seven, directed by David Fincher, and The Usual Suspects, directed by... come on, I can't fit everyone. The latter actually got him his first Oscar for Best Supporting Actor, and 4 years later, he won another for his lead role in American Beauty, a movie where Kevin plays an advertising executive who becomes attracted to his teen daughter's best friend. Back in the performing arts world, he became the artistic director at the Old Vic, one of London's most historically significant theaters. He held this position for 12 years before leaving in 2015 with an honorary knighthood. He also ventured into directing movies, though the 2 films he made both failed at the box office. In 2013, Spacey would take on his most iconic role, Frank Underwood in House of Cards. This was Netflix's first ever original series, and it took the world by storm. In fact, it almost single-handedly pioneered the streaming model shows today use. Fuck you, House of Cards. Kevin Spacey was renowned for his ability to portray villains like no other, but maybe a bit too well. In 2017, at the height of the Me Too movement, actor Anthony Rapp claimed that in 1986, a drunk Kevin Spacey made unwanted advances towards him. Anthony would have been 15 and Spacey would have been 27. Rapp already told this story back in 2001, but without naming names, further adding to its credibility. In response, Kevin tweeted a Notes app apology concluding with the announcement that he was choosing to live as a gay man. Changing the difficulty to hard mode, I see. After this apology, 15 more victims came out with similar claims, all while projects featuring him either got cancelled or replaced him. House of Cards chose to kill off his character for the then upcoming final season, which was suffering delays because of the ordeal. When it came to the legal proceedings, though, it got messy. The first case involved a news anchor who claimed her 18-year-old son was groped by him. The court asked for the son's phone since it had damning evidence, but mysteriously, the device went missing. Kevin's lawyers believed they were covering something up, since earlier, the mother admitted to police that she deleted messages. Her reasoning was that the texts were related to her son's frat boy activities. The trial was becoming too much of a hassle, so the plaintiffs decided to drop it. Next was an anonymous massage therapist who unexpectedly died during the investigation. The cause of death was never made public, so make of that what you will. Then came Anthony Rapp, who was briefly joined by an anonymous accuser, but the court mandated public identity, so it quickly became just Anthony, who did not give an accurate description of Kevin Spacey's apartment. Also, by sheer coincidence, a play Anthony had started had a scene that kinda resembles one part of the event. These two minuscule details were enough to prove that Anthony made the whole thing up. So, it was ruled in Kevin's favor. The only thing even resembling a punishment that he got was that he had to pay $31 million to the House of Cards studio. Legally speaking, he may be clear, but come on, 16 allegations? You'd have to have done something wrong to get that many. But on the bright side, nobody wants to work with him anymore. So his presence has been reduced to obscure indie films nobody watches and the occasional weird Christmas video on YouTube. No matter what though, it's still hard to deny that he was great at acting, and his older movies still remain as classics, even if they require separating the art from the artist.
Introducing Nap Time, the latest, most effective tool for child tantrum prevention.
William Henry Cosby Jr. was a highly competitive kid. No matter what he did, he strived to be the best at it. He served as captain of both the track and field and basketball teams, as well as class president. This mindset didn't carry over to academics though. Instead of paying attention, he often joked around in class, which caused him to fail the 10th grade. He then dropped out of high school and opted to take distance learning classes instead. After earning his high school equivalent diploma, Cosby served in the Navy as a hospital corpsman for 4 years, before leaving to study at Temple University and work as a bartender at a club. Customers there found his personality entertaining, regularly giving him large tips. It was there that Bill Cosby discovered his gift for comedy, so he left college to pursue a stand-up career. During this time, the top comedians were focusing on pushing boundaries with their edgy humor, but Bill took a different approach. His material was instead family-friendly, and focused primarily on telling stories about his eventful life. Race was a subject he'd purposefully avoid, to appear relatable to anyone regardless of their background. This unique perspective worked greatly, and soon he was traveling across the country to perform in sold-out venues. In 1965, he landed his first major TV role on NBC's I Spy, becoming one of the first black actors to be prominently televised. Given the time frame, many were against the show's existence, with some states even banning it outright. But the chemistry between the protagonists was able to break the color barrier and captivate audiences. Bill Cosby was a very marketable figure, so he'd also appear in commercials for a whole slew of products. Soon he'd venture into creating his own shows, such as Fat Albert and The Cosby Kids, a cartoon that taught many important life lessons. While these projects had varying degrees of success, stand-up was his main focus. But that changed in 1984 when he made his magnum opus, The Cosby Show, a sitcom about a fictional upper-class family that took inspiration from his life. Bill was involved in every aspect of production and starred as the main character, Cliff Huxtable, oh my god. The show became a phenomenon, dominating ratings charts and generating enormous revenue for both NBC and Cosby. It had clean humor that anyone could enjoy, and uplifted audiences with its positive messages. Because of this, Bill Cosby was officially dubbed America's Dad. Don't you fucking dare steal his spotlight! Once The Cosby Show ended, he continued creating television projects, though none reached the same heights as before. He laid quite low in the public eye for about 2 decades, not really doing anything notable. Apart from Little Bill, that was a pretty fire show. But then in 2013, he made a grand return to stand-up with Far From Finished, his first special in decades. Bill was back, and he had another special planned to debut on Netflix the following year, until another comedian, Hannibal Buress, threw a wrench in his plans. So Hannibal was performing a routine in Philadelphia, where he expressed his disdain for Cosby's moral grandstanding. Amidst this diatribe, he said,
I can talk down to you because I had a successful sitcom. Yeah, it was a great living, Bill Cosby, so kind of brings you down a couple notches. I don't curse on stage, but yeah, you're a rapist, so...
At first, first, the audience believed the grape allegation was a joke. But Hannibal wasn't kidding, and he instructed everyone to Google Bill Cosby grape. There, the truth could be discovered. In 2005, a Temple University employee named Andrea Constand sued him for SA. She had went to Cosby's house and talked about being stressed, so he gave her Benadryl to help her relax, only for Bill to inappropriately touch her while she was barely conscious. Though he avoided criminal charges at the time, Cosby was ordered to pay Andrea $3 million. This Hannibal Buress clip went viral and led to 35 women coming out with very similar stories. Bill Cosby would invite them over, spike a drink with drugs that would knock them out, and sexually assault them while incapacitated. At least 2 victims were underage. Accusers were paid large sums of hush money, all while authorities remained skeptical due to his wholesome public image. It was only now, thanks to the internet, that allegations like these could spread out of Cosby's control. In response, Netflix canceled his upcoming special, reruns of his shows were pulled from networks, and as for Bill himself, oh my god, this might just be the worst PR move in history. Like, it gives the ukulele a run for its money. So this 77-year-old, or whoever was running his social media accounts, must have heard that the internet was sharing these things called memes. He thought that maybe this will be a good way to get the fellow kids to like me again. So he created a site for people to make memes of him, hoping they would show the positive side of him. How do you think it went? At long last, it seemed like he was about to face the consequences of his actions. But uh-oh, his accusers didn't take legal action until it was too late. Even though it was basically impossible for them to. The statute of limitations means if you wait too long after a crime is committed, you can't charge them. Luckily, the judge reopened the Constand case and through it gave him 3 to 10 years in state prison. He would only go on to serve 3 years in jail though. Not cause 3 years was the minimum, it's cause the Pennsylvania Supreme Court overturned the case because the prosecutors already promised not to charge him. Thus, it violated due process of law. So Bill Cosby is walking free. The only hope we have now is that he's 87 years old. The Grim Reaper should be coming for him any second now.
Ask myself, why won't Tom Cruise just come out the closet?
Robert Sylvester Kelly grew up living a difficult childhood, enduring sexual abuse by several family members. As a result, he was an outcast who struggled in school. One of his only friends growing up was a girl named Lulu, whom he looks back on as his first love. Tragically though, Lulu would drown to death after some older kids pushed her into a river. Kelly found comfort in music, performing in choirs at church and winning first prize at a high school talent show. His intended career path back then was basketball, but the music teacher was so amazed by his voice, she actively disrupted games to get him to pursue singing. Eventually, Robert caved in and discovered basketball just wasn't for him, so he dropped out of high school senior year. Shortly thereafter, he formed a group called MGM, or Mentally Gifted Men, with 3 other artists. They would perform on the TV show Big Break, where they'd win the $100,000 grand prize and gain national recognition. But despite this newfound success, MGM would quickly break up due to Robert's controlling and selfish behavior. Kelly then signed to Jive Records and released his first ever album, Born into the 90s, which was a collab with the group Public Announcement. The record performed okay, but again, Robert was difficult to work with, regularly shouting at and berating producers who gave their own input. Not many were willing to put up with his toxic attitude, so his next album, 12 Play, was a solo effort, and it dominated R&B charts, becoming certified gold in just a few months. R. Kelly was now a national star. He had become a hero to his hometown of Chicago, inspiring many struggling teens in the area. Robert frequently took time out of his day to speak to these kids and give them advice, though he would noticeably prioritize young girls, one of them being the niece of his manager, Aaliyah Houghton. Aaliyah was a music prodigy at just 14 years old, whom Kelly was enamored by. He soon became a mentor to her and helped write songs for her debut album. Of course, there's fucking sirens. Age Ain't Nothing But a Number. These guys leave clues like they're the Riddler. The two became inseparable, so much so that Robert, aged 27, secretly married her and made her lie about her age on the certificate. Rumors about this spread to the public, but they both swore up and down that they were just friends. A judge quickly nullified the marriage, and once Aaliyah turned 18, she sued to erase all records of it. While all of this was going on, Kelly had another legal battle with a girl named Tiffany Hawkins. Hawkins met Robert when she was 15 and he was 24, being invited to visit his house. Her own home life was abusive, so she swiftly agreed and brought several of her friends over. When the night came though, Tiffany noticed that her friends and Robert were nowhere to be found. She searched all around the house looking for them until she walked in on R. Kelly engaging in group sex with her friends. After being caught, he made a deal with a shocked and confused Tiffany. If she provided him with more teens to abuse, she'd be welcome to stay. Hawkins complied and brought more of her friends over, before eventually becoming a target of SA herself by Robert. The case reached a $250,000 settlement, but was kept private, all while R. Kelly continued to release chart-topping hits like I Believe I Can Fly. Robert started incorporating the flute into his music, thus he called himself the Pied Piper of R&B, after the medieval myth. In said myth, the Pied Piper would lead children out of town and kill them if their parents didn't pay for his service. This was probably unintentional on his part, but still doesn't paint a good picture. What was, no doubt intentional, was a video where he sexually abuses an underage girl and pisses on her. This horrifying tape gained national attention after an unknown source sent it to the Chicago Sun-Times. He was promptly arrested, but given a $750K bail that he paid off a day later. Then, while being investigated, 12 explicit pictures of that same victim were found, which led to another arrest. Except this time they gave him a $12,000 bail? That's like nothing to him! Unfortunately, these charges had to be dropped because the police didn't have enough evidence to justify the search. You literally have a video of him committing a federal crime. How the fuck is that not enough proof? As if that wasn't bad enough, the victim did not testify, so R. Kelly was found not guilty for the tape. He was completely free to go, and his career continued on like nothing happened. From 2005 to 2012, he'd create his most ambitious project, Trapped in the Closet, a collection of 33 music videos that told an overarching story filled with twists and turns. It garnered massive acclaim, effectively drowning out any and all concerns about his personal life. Then 2017 rolled around. 3 sets of parents claimed that he ran a sex cult and their daughters were victims of it. The allegations were back in the spotlight once again, and this time, enough was enough. Activists created the Mute R. Kelly movement to encourage boycotts of his music. They would protest outside his concerts, downvote his songs on streaming services, and demand radio stations stop playing his music. Kelly saw that the movement was gaining traction, so in response, he made the track I Admit, which, contrary to the title, was the furthest thing from an admission of guilt. It received extremely negative reception. The final nail in the coffin came at the beginning of 2019 when Surviving R. Kelly premiered. This documentary highlighted his 26-year history of abuse, with several new victims speaking out. It's also revealed that he married Aaliyah because he thought he got her pregnant, and the girl from the peeing video was paid not to testify. Somehow, he was even worse than what people assumed. In response, his record label dropped him, streaming services stopped recommending his music, and artists who worked with him completely disowned their collabs. Knowing damn well he was about to face jail time, he went on CBS for one final interview, wherein he had a complete meltdown.
Y'all killing me with this. I gave y'all 30 years of my career. Robert. 30 years of my career. Y'all trying to kill me. You killing me, man. This is not about music. I'm trying to have a relationship with my kids.
Bad wording. He was subsequently arrested, found guilty of 22 varying charges, and sentenced to 30 years in prison. Raymond Roman Thierry Polanski could not have grown up under worse circumstances. Born in 1933 in Paris, his country was still recovering from World War I. Hoping for greener pastures, his family moved back to their home of Poland, where Roman discovered his love for movies, regularly going to the theater with his parents. Unfortunately, just 2 years after settling, Germany invaded, sparking the beginning of World War II and the Holocaust. Roman could no longer go to the theater nor attend school. Instead, the family had to spend their time hiding in a Jewish ghetto. Both of his parents would get taken in by the Nazis, leaving a young Roman to his own devices. During his fight for survival, he witnessed unimaginable horrors, but he was able to find refuge. A couple named Stefania and John Buchala took Roman into their home, where he'd spend the rest of the war residing in. Roman, though scarred, had survived, and unbelievably, so did his father. The two reunited, moved back in, and life went back to normal. Roman later attended film school, where he'd create several short movies about his traumatic experiences. Once he graduated, he got to work on his first full-length picture, Knife in the Water, which was a global hit. Right out of the gate, Roman Polanski had his first Oscar nomination for Best Foreign Film. However, the country of Poland had fallen to communist rule by this time, so Roman moved to London and continued his directing journey. During the production of his fourth film, The Fearless Vampire Killers, he met Sharon Tate, a rising Hollywood star. The two entered a romantic relationship, which helped Polanski get in touch with the American film industry. In 1967, a Paramount executive contacted Roman to adapt the horror novel Rosemary's Baby. Polanski agreed, writing the script in just 3 weeks before moving to LA. Production on Rosemary's Baby was not smooth at all. It was riddled with scheduling problems and went above the studio's budget. What likely didn't help was that during this time, Roman and Tate had gotten married back in London, but ultimately the project was completed and grossed today's equivalent of over $300 million. Now both critically and commercially, Roman Polanski's work was flourishing, but his life would soon deal with yet another tragedy. On August 9th, 1969, Polanski was out in London filming a movie. The then pregnant Sharon Tate was staying back in LA partying with friends, when suddenly 4 figures from the Manson family cult broke in and murdered everyone inside. Roman Polanski had lost his wife and unborn child. This event, coupled with his grueling upbringing, affected him greatly. Unfortunately, rather than resolve his pain, he inflicted it onto another. In 1977, Roman took up a photography job for the fashion magazine Vogue. He believed that getting to take pictures of models would help him explore his love of young girls, more specifically the 13-year-old Samantha Geimer, whose mother erroneously agreed to a private photo shoot with him. During this session, Polanski was taking pictures of Samantha in positions no middle schooler should ever be in. One set showed her drinking champagne that he provided. This was not acted out, she actually chugged it and got drunk. Afterwards, Roman gave her a sedative and asked her to lie down on a bed. Samantha saw where this was going, so she refused, but Polanski didn't listen and... God, I miss when it was just weird Discord messages. When the news broke out, Hurricane, a movie he was about to film, fired him and got a different director. Then, Roman Polanski was arrested and given 6 charges. But he managed to arrange a plea deal to have all but one dismissed. Only the statutory charge was staying. But at the very least, some justice was being served. Yeah, about that. In the days leading up to his sentencing, Roman was placed on probation, giving him partial freedom. This proved to be a catastrophic mistake, because on the day of sentencing, Roman Polanski was nowhere to be found. He had fled the country and landed in France, where he had held citizenship that would grant him immunity from extradition. Polanski spent the next 42 years on the run, avoiding countries that would deport him back to America for arrest. He gave an interview attempting to justify what he did by saying, "Everybody secretly wants to do it?" This is some I made you the soy jack and me the Giga Chad type shit. While Samantha Geimer managed to file a civil suit against him and win over $600 $100K, Roman was Roman-free. He still made movies, which continued to do well at the box office and earn him awards. Then 2009 came. Polanski wanted to attend a film festival in Zurich, Switzerland, as he was set to earn a Lifetime Achievement Award, but once he landed, Swiss police detained him. It seemed like he would finally be extradited and serve his long overdue sentence. However, a petition was created to free him, and it was signed by some of the biggest names in film. Harrison Ford, Martin Scorsese, Wes Anderson, David Lynch, Darren Aronofsky. This is the movie industry's answer to the Diddy list. They argued that Roman had changed and that he was a wholesome good boy uwu now. A good person wouldn't dodge consequences for their wrongdoings for decades. And it actually kinda worked, cause he was released a few months later. Though that more so had to do with the fact that Samantha did not want to press charges. She was sick of the media attention by this point and wanted to move on with her life, which it's her decision, sure, but god, fuck the legal system. Oh man, this video has been testing my sanity. It is horrifying how such powerful people can just get away with these things for so long, if not entirely. But nothing I've covered in this video, nor previous videos, nor future videos, even comes close to how disgusting of a degenerate our final subject is. This guy is like 20 P. Diddy's at once. And if you don't live in the UK, it's likely you've never even heard of him. I didn't for most of my life. And ever since I first learned about him, I don't think I've been the same person since. Without further ado, I present... James Wilson Vincent Savile was born in England right before the Great Depression. Thus, his family faced harsh poverty. At age 2, Jimmy caught pneumonia, but thanks to prayers from his Catholic mother, he swiftly recovered. His father, though, was not as caring, since he gave his son cigars when he was only 7. After leaving school at age 14, this really was a different time, Jimmy took up an office job, but this didn't last long, since Britain entered World War II shortly thereafter. He enlisted to work as a coal miner in the war, but was injured in a dynamite explosion, leaving him with crutches and a corset for years to come. After the war, he started playing records in dance halls, making him one of the very first DJs in history. Radio Luxembourg noticed this and hired him as a presenter. Soon, Jimmy Savile was hosting 6 programs a week, which were listened to by millions. On TV, he also gained prominence, hosting music shows like Top of the Pops, but he would truly become a household name in 1974 when BBC chose him to host Jim'll Fix It, a program where kids would send in their biggest wish and Jimmy Savile would grant it. The show exploded in popularity and ran for 286 episodes across 20 seasons. It also saw a short-lived reboot in 2007 called Jim'll Fix It Strikes Again. That's a violent name. According to Savile, the reason Jim'll Fix It was so successful was because he hated kids. Huh? But he later retracted the statement, saying he was only deflecting scrutiny of his life. Regardless, Jimmy Savile had become a British TV megastar, and he more than returned the favor. Throughout his life, he raised over £40 million for charity, volunteered for hospitals, and donated to medical schools. Why though? Universities should have more than enough. The UK government and royal family admired him, with him being given Knight Bachelor status by Margaret Thatcher. Of course it was her. Few were as well liked as Jimmy Savile. When he died in 2011, a few days before his 85th birthday, the funeral was packed. Thousands flooded the streets of Leeds, England to mourn the loss of a charitable icon. He was even given a golden coffin. It seemed Jimmy Savile would go down in history as one of Britain's most beloved figures. Rumors did circulate while he was alive, but they were quickly shot down. Cause how could he do anything wrong? He's given so much to people in need. Philanthropists named Jimmy are the most trustworthy people on planet Earth. But now that he was gone, journalists saw it as a good opportunity to investigate. They began interviewing the possible victims, talking to former colleagues, gathering as much information as they possibly could. And oh my god, the conclusion they came to was nothing short of reality shattering. This is your final warning. 3, 2, 1. Jimmy Savile was a massive creep. No, that's putting it lightly. His total number of victims goes well into the triple digits, dating all the way back to the 50s. He used his popularity as a kids show host to do unspeakable things to children, and he did not hide it. A colleague of his once walked in on Jimmy French kissing an underage girl. He even admitted to this behavior in his autobiography, released to the public in 1974, and it managed to slip by. Jimmy also said he didn't want a computer because people would assume he downloaded CP. Yeah, they might have a good reason to, but what truly makes him worse than just about every other predator was that many of the victims were recovering patients at hospitals he volunteered at. The ages ranged from 5 to 75. He likes them young and old. Jimmy also had access to the mortuary where he... I'm not getting any fucking ads from this. And it wasn't just him. His brother also essayed a few victims, as did 3 doctors at the hospitals. He was a virus infecting others. Now, what did authorities do about him? Jack shit. At several points in his life, British police received reports, but they didn't have enough evidence, so they couldn't investigate. One victim did have evidence, but decided not to come forward out of fear that it would start a media frenzy. So maybe the networks he worked with could quietly drop him, right? No. BBC denied up and down that he was a monster. They meat-wrote Jimmy like he had a BBC. In 1978, Sex Pistols singer John Lydon was interviewed by BBC, where he said he wanted to kill Jimmy Savile and hinted at his misconduct. This segment was cut out, which John accurately predicted would happen. Once Savile died, their anchors had written a report on the allegations, but the network refused to let it air. Even without BBC though, Jimmy Savile had immense power. Any news outlet that even mentioned his name and child abuse in the same article got sued. Comedian Jerry Sadowitz had to cancel an album because he called Jimmy a PDF file and did not want to take the risk. Nobody would dare cross his path until he was out of the picture entirely. In 2012, a documentary about his abuse premiered on ITV, which sparked more and more victims to come forward. The fallout was immense. Jimmy's massive black gravestone was thrown in the dumpster. Places he volunteered at removed any and all mention of him. His estate was ordered to pay £3.3 million to the victims. A cottage he owned was vandalized before it was auctioned off and sold. My god, that poor owner. BBC finally caved in and stopped airing reruns of his shows, and the UK government set up a whole inquiry re-examining the way it handled abuse. They did what they could to correct everything, but ultimately, it was too little, too late. Ugh, praise the Lord, it's finally over. I can go and get some goddamn rest now. I'm gonna need a lot of time to cleanse myself. It's gonna be hard to top this video, huh? Man, what a year it has been. I wanted to end it off with a bang, and I believe I did just that. I hope you have a Merry Christmas and an excellent 2025. Just, watch out for this guy called Raul Menendez.